read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, how we should think about the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, what's unique about it, how is it important in our spiritual life. It'll be a short session, about 20 minutes. And then we'll have the Q&A, and then we'll do a guided meditation. So, this is from Saturday, May 23rd, 1885, at Ram's house. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting in the drawing room on the ground floor of Ram's house. He was surrounded by devotees and was conversing with them. Mohima, meaning Mohima Chakraborty, he was a follower of Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. Mohima sat in front of him, M to his left. Pultu, Bhavanath, Nityagopal, Haramohan, and a few others sat around him. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The master inquired after several devotees. Master, to M, hasn't the younger Naren arrived yet? Presently, the younger Naren entered the room. Master, what about him? M, who, sir? Master, Kishori. Isn't Girish Ghosh coming? What about Narendra? A few minutes later, Narendra arrived and saluted Sri Ramakrishna. Master, to the devotees, it would be fine if Kedar were here. He agrees with Girish. To Mohima, smiling, he says the same thing. Ram had arranged the kirtan. With folded hands, the musician said to Sri Ramakrishna, Sir, I can begin if you give the order. The master drank some water and chewed spices from a small bag. He asked M to close the bag. The musician started the kirtan. As Sri Ramakrishna heard the sound of the drum, he went into an ecstatic mood. While listening to the prelude of the kirtan, he plunged into deep samadhi. He placed his legs on the lap of Nityagopal, who was sitting near him. The devotee, too, was in an ecstatic mood. He was weeping. The other devotees looked on intently. Regaining partial consciousness, Sri Ramakrishna said, from the Nitya to the Leela, and from the Leela to the Nitya, to Nityagopal. What is your ideal? Nityagopal. Both are good. Sri Ramakrishna closed his eyes and said, is it only this? Does God exist only when the eyes are closed and cease to exist when the eyes are opened? The Leela belongs to him to whom the Nitya belongs, and the Nitya belongs to him to whom the Leela belongs. To Mohima, my dear sir, let me tell you, Mohima, revered sir, both are according to the will of God. Master, some people climb the 7 floors of a building and cannot get down, but some climb up and then at will visit the lower floors. Uddhava said to the gopis, he whom you address as your Krishna dwells in all beings. It is he alone who has become the universe and its living beings. Therefore I say, does a man meditate on God only when his eyes are closed? Doesn't he see anything of God when his eyes are open? Mohima, I have a question to ask, sir. A lover of God needs nirvana sometime or other, doesn't he? Nirvana, this Advaitic dissolution in non-dual Brahman. Master, it cannot be said that bhaktas need nirvana. According to some schools, there is an eternal Krishna and there are also his eternal devotees. Nitya Krishna, Nitya Bhakta. Krishna is consciousness embodied, and his abode also is consciousness embodied. Chinmaya Shyama, Chinmaya Shyama, Chinmaya Dhama. That's the original Bengali. Krishna is eternal, and the devotees also are eternal. Krishna and the devotees are like the moon and the stars, always near each other. You yourself repeat, quote, what need is there of penance if God is seen within and without, end quote. Further, I have told you that the devotee who is born with an element of Vishnu cannot altogether get rid of bhakti. Once, I fell into the clutches of a jnani who made me listen to Vedanta for 11 months. Who was this? In Totapuri. But he could not altogether destroy the seed of bhakti in me. No matter where my mind wandered, it would come back to the Divine Mother. Whenever I sang of her, Nengta would weep. Nengta, the naked one. In Bengali, Nengta means naked one. So he's referring to Totapuri. Whenever I sang of her, Nengta would weep and say, ah, what is this? You see, he was such a great jnani, and still he wept. To the younger Naren and the others, remember the popular saying that if a man drinks the joys of the alek creeper, a plant grows inside his stomach. Once the seed of bhakti is sown, the effect is inevitable. It will gradually grow into a tree with flowers and fruits. You may reason and argue 1,000 times, but if you have the seed of bhakti within you, you will surely come back to Hari. The devotees listened silently to the master. Sri Ramakrishna asked Mohima, laughing, what is the thing you enjoy most? Mohima, smiling, nothing, sir. I like mangoes. Master, smiling, all by yourself? Or do you want to share them with others? Mohima, smiling, I am not so anxious to give others a share. I may as well eat them all by myself. Master, but do you know my attitude? I accept both, the Nitya and the Leela. Doesn't God exist if one looks around with eyes open? After realizing God, one knows that she is both the Absolute and the universe. It is she who is the indivisible Satchit Ananda. Again, it is she who has become the universe and its living beings. One needs sadhana. Mere study of the scriptures will not do. I noticed that though Vidyasagar had no doubt read a great deal, he had not realized what was inside him. He was satisfied with helping boys get their education, but had not tasted the bliss of God. What will mere study accomplish? How little one assimilates. The almanac may forecast 20 measures of rain, but you don't get a drop by squeezing its pages. Mohima. We have so many duties in the world. Where is the time for sadhana? Master. Why should you say such a thing? It is you who describe the world as illusory, like a dream. Rama and Lakshmana wanted to go to Ceylon, but the ocean was before them. Lakshmana was angry. Taking his bow and arrow, he said, I shall kill Varuna. This ocean prevents our going to Ceylon. Rama explained the matter to him, saying, Lakshmana, all that you are seeing is unreal, like a dream. The ocean is unreal. Your anger is also unreal. It is equally unreal to think of destroying one unreal thing by means of another. Mohimacharan kept quiet. He had many duties in the world. He had lately started a school to help others. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So I just read a small passage from one of the world's great scriptures. And Maharaj asked me to speak briefly about what makes this text so special and so unique, and how should we approach this text? How should we read this text for our spiritual benefit? First of all, I've read many teachings from many great saints within Hinduism, from other religious traditions. I have not found another text quite like this one. This is absolutely unique. One of the things that makes it so unique is that it's not just a record of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. It's not just that. It's not even just dialogues, conversations. We have talks with Ramana Maharshi, for instance. It's a beautiful book. And they're dialogues. But this Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is something different. Because the author, M. Mohendranath Gupta, highly educated person, had almost like a photographic memory. Okay? And because Sri Ramakrishna knew, Sri Ramakrishna was God himself, Sri Ramakrishna knew that there was one person, one of his disciples, that would write this book. And he started grooming him from a very young age. M only realized that much later. Even in middle school, like we call it middle school in the US, this grades 6 through 8, like that. M would be keeping a journal. So he's already developing this practice, this habit of remembering what happened throughout the day, writing it down with meticulous detail. So with all that training and then the high-level education, he had multiple master's degrees and so on. And he even had legal background. And M, later, he said, when people asked him about how did you write this text, he said he learned from these law books that he wanted to make this book as authentic as possible. And because of his legal training, his legal education, he understood that to bring authenticity, you have to give as many concrete details as possible. So what he's done is he gives the date, not just the date, who was in the room, who was present at the time. So he gives a whole list, like you saw in my reading. All the people that are in the room, what were they doing, what was Sri Ramakrishna doing, how was he behaving. So I just read for a few minutes. This is so remarkable. You find Sri Ramakrishna taking spices out of his little bag, eating them, putting it away. Small details. You know who's in the room, what he's saying about ordinary things. Then you hear that he's asking somebody to sing a song. Next moment, he's going into samadhi, into spiritual ecstasy, samadhi. Others are also crying in ecstasy and this and that. Remarkable. Next moment, he comes down from samadhi, and then he gives the highest spiritual teachings. Why should I see God only with eyes closed? Why? I see God right now. The people I'm speaking to are God. And he goes in the highest flights of philosophy and spirituality. Mohima asks this very important question. He's a follower of Shankara, so he's asking, but bhaktas also, ultimately they have to become sugar. Becoming sugar it must be higher than eating sugar. And Sri Ramakrishna says, no, that is not the case. So that's why this passage beautifully links up with the lecture, actually. Eating sugar, becoming sugar are on an equal footing. And see, when we read the gospel, we have to read it with shraddha, reverence. This is a holy text. He's an incarnation giving these very lofty spiritual teachings. And another thing to keep in mind when we're reading the gospel is that there are two main kinds of teachings that we find in the gospel, okay? Some are highly philosophical. On almost every page, you're seeing Sri Ramakrishna explaining the highest philosophy, like in this passage. And you also find extremely practical teachings, okay, about what should we do. Many householders came to him. What should we do? I'm so busy. I have to raise my children. I have to go to work. He said, and then he would give these very practical answers. So you find on the one hand, teachings that emphasize spiritual philosophy. And on the other hand, teachings that emphasize spiritual practice, very practical teachings. It's not one or the other, you get both. And that's very important. And you have to ask yourself why. Why did God, in the form of Sri Ramakrishna, choose to give both kinds of teachings? And many of us here are not so philosophically minded. We might say, I don't care about the philosophy. I'll ignore it. Or I'll read it, but I won't think deeply about it. It's not for me. Let the philosophers read the philosophy. I'll focus on the practice. Wrong. This is not the right attitude. There must be a good reason why Sri Ramakrishna taught the highest philosophy and the most practical teachings at the same time. Now, some of you might know, some of you, I'm sure, recite the Bhagavad Gita. It's a wonderful spiritual practice. At the end of each chapter, when you finish reciting a chapter, there's what's called a colophon in Sanskrit. Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre. Bhagavad Gita is referred to as, number one, Brahma Vidya, the science of Brahman. It gives the highest spiritual and philosophical teachings about the nature of Brahman. At the same time, it is a great Yoga Shastra. It's a practical spiritual manual. Both those things at the same time. Exactly the same thing can be said about the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It's Brahma Vidya. He gives the highest spiritual and philosophical teachings. It's equally Yoga Shastra. It's a very practical spiritual manual that helps us to navigate our day-to-day lives. And now the question is, why do we need both? Why can't we just have the practice? Why do we need the philosophy? The reason is, I already mentioned it briefly in the talk, but I'm going to say it again. Sri Ramakrishna understood that you need a framework to ground your spiritual practice. It's like this. You have a roadmap. These days, people use GPS, and so but I'm thinking of an example from before internet, so 1980s. How would people drive from one place to another, going from here to, Cape Town or whatever? How do you get there? You use a map, right? You're in point A, you want to get to point B. You have to know, first of all, where am I now? Point A. What is the goal I have to get to? That's point B. Philosophy is what tells you what is the goal. And what will you encounter along the way? What kinds of things? What kinds of obstacles? What road do you have to take? So the practical teachings are explaining you have to go by Highway 101, and then you have to take this route, that route. Philosophy tells you, where are you now? Point A. And what is the goal? Without knowing what the goal is, your practice is going to be going in this direction, and you won't have any conviction. So now, in the case of our tradition, most of us are devotees of Sri Ramakrishna. But who is Sri Ramakrishna? Who is Sri Ramakrishna? Is he Nirguna Brahman? Is he the impersonal, non-dual pure consciousness? Is he the personal God? Is he an incarnation? Is he all of the above? Does he have form? Is he without form? The answer, by the way, based on my talk, you should know the answer. Yes, 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 yes. But see, some people who don't have a clear understanding of Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy and Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, they're not going to have clear answers to these questions. Especially if you have half-digested ideas about Advaita Vedanta and all these things. Then you have half-digested ideas and you think, so Sri Ramakrishna, Bhakti, these are lower practices. Bhakti is a lower practice because I don't have an impure mind. I'm an inferior spiritual aspirant. And that's why I'm worshipping Sri Ramakrishna as a personal God, as an incarnation. Ultimately, I have to reach this Advaitic. I have to practice the path of knowledge. I have to realize Sri Ramakrishna as the non-dual, impersonal, attributeless, pure consciousness. Because that's his true nature. All this bhakti stuff is because I'm an inferior aspirant. This is one way of thinking. This is a different philosophical framework. This is Shankara's philosophical framework. We have to be very clear in our minds. What is our framework? Sri Ramakrishna gives us the framework, but we have to be very attentive and with full concentration and with great reverence read this text. And we should not overlook, we should not trivialize his teachings on philosophy. His teachings on philosophy and his teachings on spiritual practice go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. Because the philosophical teachings provide the philosophical basis for the spiritual practice. Another simple question. We all know, all Hindus know that the goal of life is moksha. But now what I said in the talk, moksha itself takes different forms according to your philosophical framework. Bhakti schools say that moksha takes the form of dwelling in an eternal heaven, eating sugar. Advaita Vedanta says moksha takes the form of no coming and going. You just rest in your true nature as non-dual pure consciousness. And everything else is unreal. All these heavens are also part of the dream. That cannot be the highest goal. Now, if you know Advaita Vedanta, you might be confused. Now then, what is it? That's why I mentioned in the talk, somebody asked Holy Mother, I don't want this nirvana. Mohima Chakrabarti loves nirvana because he's a follower of Shankara. And he wants everybody to attain nirvana. This is common, very common among most religious practitioners. Whatever they think is the highest, they want to say that that's the highest for everybody. That's why Mohima Chakravarti loves Advaita Vedanta. So he says, Bhakta is this eating sugar, this is lower, right? And he wants Sri Ramakrishna to support him. Ramakrishna says, no, never think that. Eating sugar is as great as becoming sugar. Nitya Krishna, Nitya Bhakta. You see how profound this philosophical teaching is. And it's easy to just, I'm just reading it. But it doesn't sink in, you don't assimilate it, but you have to think very deeply. That's why what I would recommend is, of course, everybody should read the whole gospel. It's a long text. Don't read abridged versions. Ideally, you know Bangla and you read the original Bengali, because there's nothing like the original Bengali Gathamrita. God himself, the way he speaks, it's so charming, so humorous, so full of joy and charm and profundity, and he's constantly playing with words, constantly doing wordplay. All of it's missing from any translation. If you get a Hindi translation, Vachanamrit, that comes closer to Bangla, so you can get some of the wordplay. But if you read in English, sorry, you're out of luck. Impossible. You're missing 80% of the beauty and the charm and the humor of the gospel if you read it in any language other than Bengali. It's just a fact. Now, whether you go on to read Bangla as a result, that's up to you. But I'm just telling you because I know both languages. And I read the English translation. It's an amazing translation. There's nothing wrong with the translation as such. But no translation will be able to capture the beauty and the charm and the humor of the original. And the power. As an avatara, this is something about avatars. Look at the Bible. When Jesus gave teachings, he also used parables and stories. They get seared in the mind. You can't forget it. You hear it once and you'll never forget it. Sri Ramakrishna, same thing. Dhyan korbe mone bone okone. One short sentence. You know what he's saying? One should meditate either in the corner of a room or in a deep secluded forest or in your own mind. But you see how long the English was, my translation, and look at the Bangla. Dhyan korbe mone bone okone. Notice the rhyme. Mone bone kone. The rhyme. Mone, in the mind. Bone, in a secluded forest. Kone, in the corner of a room. All of that's lost in the English. All of that beauty, the rhyme, the simplicity, the power missing. Okay, I don't want to make you feel bad. What I'm just saying, the text is not originally written in English. Sri Ramakrishna didn't speak many. He spoke a few English words. He said, thank you. He said, philosophy. He said a few words like that. In general, he spoke in Bangla. And we shouldn't pretend that this text was originally written in English or any other language. He spoke in Bangla. The original text is in Bangla. And I'm a scholar, as you know, and so I studied German philosophy during my PhD. Because I wanted to study German philosophy, what did I do? I learned German. I lived in Germany as a Fulbright scholar. I attended German medium classes on philosophy, Kant and Hegel, and then I could read the original texts. Anybody who's really serious about understanding Thakur's teachings deeply and to appreciate the full power, they should read the original Bangla, if at all possible. If it's not possible, read the English translation, but keep in mind, because there's a lot of confusion generated by translations. Those are not his words originally. He spoke in Bangla. Always remember that. And then the last thing, because we don't have much time, no? So I'll just say one more thing, which is when we read the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, it's a combination of multiple spiritual practices. On the one hand, it is a bhakti practice, okay? And Muktidanandaji, who's a trustee of the Ramakrishna Mission, he's the head of our Mysuru Center, he would describe this sadhana of reading the gospel as Sri Ramakrishna Sannidhya Sadhana. Sri Ramakrishna Sannidhya Sadhana. It is the practice of the presence of Sri Ramakrishna. Remember, in that brief passage I read to you, we learned about his spice bag. He's eating the spices, putting them back, all the people in the room, what he's saying, what he's doing. Do you see what I mean? He literally feels like he's there in front of you. And the magic of the gospel is, especially if you read the original Bangla, but it's also true in any language, when you read it, it's like it's like an immersive virtual reality. You know, nowadays we have AI and virtual reality. Because it's so full of vivid detail, concrete details about who's in the room, what they're doing, you feel like you're present in the room. It's amazing. It's 2025, but you feel transported back into 1885. the moment you read the passage, because of the vivid details. And you really feel like you're in a spiritual virtual reality with Sri Ramakrishna in front of you. As I said, even more amazing and powerful in the original Bangla, but in any translation, this is also. But you should be reading the text like that. It's not just a book. It's an immersive spiritual experience where you are enjoying being part of the Leela of Sri Ramakrishna, the avatar of our age. We are a playmate of Sri Ramakrishna sitting in that room. He's speaking to us. That's how we should feel. When he's giving these teachings, he's speaking directly to us. And we feel his presence. We know what he's wearing. We know what he's saying. We know what he's doing with his spice bag and we know what spiritual states he's in, what jokes he's making. And we're there in the room with him. So we're practicing the presence of Sri Ramakrishna as we read the gospel. And at the same time, it's a svadhyaya, which means it's a study of a great scripture, of a holy scripture, just as we read the Gita. But it's not just svadhyaya, it's svadhyaya and it's also Sri Ramakrishna Sannidhya Sadhana. It's a combination of Bhakti Yoga and of Jnana Yoga, actually. And we should keep that in mind. Okay? I think that's... Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so that concludes the gospel component. Now,
sisters and brothers.